I'm Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to Southwest Magazine. My guest today is Charlotte County author Zoe Fitch, who is here to talk about her first book in a series of 4 called 42nd Wave. Thank you, Zoe, for being here.
Thank you, Vicki. I'm so happy to be here.
So I should start off by saying this 42nd Wave is the first of 4 books. Breaking on the Shore is the second, and the next 2 are in your head still.
That's right. Even just barely in my head. Yeah, but they're coming.
Now, this is set in near future, New Brunswick, St. Stephen specifically, so I think a lot of Charlotte County residents are going to love seeing their part of the world. 2031 is where book 1 is set. Tell us a little bit about, for people at home who don't know, what is the premise of the novel?
Beautiful. So this concept came to me sort of as we were all moving through the pandemic. And I started to be really fascinated with the idea that all at once a light switch was flipped, and we were able to adhere to new rules because we needed to, in terms of the pandemic restrictions, regulations. And at the same time, we're facing a climate crisis that's increasingly concerning. I mean, concerning is such a light word when it comes to the burning planet. But I thought, what if we were able to flip a switch in that context as well? And this got me imagining a future right here in Charlotte County, 10 years in the future from when I was writing it, where the burning of liquid fuel had been made illegal in a universal sort of way. And what that led to was a deconstruction of a lot of the big political systems, the big food industry systems, the big transportation and shipping and distribution systems, because we weren't able to order our groceries from Amazon anymore. So in the world that gets created in the book is a community-based world, and we start to see a trade economy develop. We start to see neighbors relying on what each other is growing in their gardens and what skills and mastery our neighbors can bring to us and what we can bring back to them. And the further I got into the world, the more I thought, oh man, we're doing this wrong currently, you know? So the idea was to sort of explore this future world that could be designed with systems for a smaller community. And I felt like Charlotte County was the perfect place to set that, because a lot of us spend so much time in our pantries and barns and kitchens and workshops already leaning toward this way of life.
Yeah, I think those small towns, we could handle it if something like that happened.
Yeah.
And that idea of no gas, no fuel to burn, I think to some people could sound dystopian, but the way you handle it in the novel is very optimistic and hopeful, and it makes you really think, because the premise could sound, this is dystopian fiction, but it might just be dystopian for Galen Weston.
Exactly. I think there are going to be a couple of billionaires who are going to find it extremely dystopian, and they can email me directly. But I find a lot of people have made this comment that the book should be dystopian, but it actually feels quite cozy. It feels like a really hopeful sort of future. And I think the only dystopian element of it is, again, at the cost of the poor billionaires, that it would require the dismantling of these systems that are too big to function. So if we're looking at this as a utopian world, I think it's pretty easy to imagine ourselves just shifting from a rat race sort of economy to one that has us speaking more with our neighbors and doing a puzzle in between times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I want to tell people at home that you really drew from the community. There's a lot of people that were characters that were inspired by real people.
Yes.
Some that are just real people. Susie from Carmen's is right off the bat in the novel, so if you feel right at home. I didn't write them all down, but I'm going to talk about a few of the businesses.
Yes.
Oh, I must have had it on a different paper. But you had Five Kings in there, Carmen's, Susie, I think Harper's Pets, The Courier, Fundy Soap Company, were just some of the names that were in the book. I think your niece is inspired one of the characters as well.
That's right.
Tell people at home why you drew from St. Stephen, the real St. Stephen, to create this setting.
I think the simplest answer is that it writes itself. I loved writing my niece Sophie as my main character. She was 13 when I was writing the first book, and 16 when I was writing the second book. So my writing process changed a little bit because she now has a cell phone she can text me on. So sometimes I'd get a message like, do you think that this one friend of mine might be doing something with pottery, and it was a really cool process to get her imagining the future as well. And in terms of incorporating local businesses, it's like these places are already symbols for life done right in so many ways. And Susie was an easy figure to pick out of the town for that. Like many people, after finishing school in St. Stephen, I moved out west for 10 years and did the big city thing, and thankfully was pulled back to town just before the pandemic really hit, where, in New Brunswick we do social distancing pretty much just as we wake up in the morning. It's pretty natural to us. So I found as soon as I came back to town that Susie's warmth and Carmen's Diner was it was a community hug to go in there and to feel recognized, to feel like you knew you were going to run into other people from town. And St. Andrews has that in such a beautiful way as well. Actually, I'd love to give a shout out to Kaylee Dunfield. When I was first thinking about moving back, but I was loving Vancouver and the life and friends that I had there. I had a beer with Kaylee Dunfield at the Herring, and she said, I don't miss Toronto. What I would miss about leaving here is that at any day during the week, I can wander through town and know that I will run into somebody that I can have a real conversation with. And that really hooked in my heart. And it's easy to show the beauty of the people here who really love being here.
And so you would have come home. So this book came out 2021. I think the first time I interviewed you on this exact show was over Zoom in the pandemic.
That's right.
And I should let people at home know that one big part of the book is people of St. Stephen showing a market economy to the big city people, showing people how you could live without fuel and just change your lifestyle to a more simple, cohesive way of doing things. But some of this comes from real life, because I think at the time we were doing profiles on how small businesses were coping in the pandemic, and you were finding a way to do a market through it all. Tell people a little bit about that and how it inspired the book.
Absolutely. Heather Almeida and I had started working on the Fundy Market because we were both market vendors, and I was doing a fresh homemade bread by subscription stand at the market, and she was doing Fundy Soap Co. and a ton of beautiful products that she made by hand, but was looking to get into vegan baking and some gluten-free options and alternatives. And one or two people had said to each Heather, both Heather and I, there's going to be competition. There's going to be another baker at the market. And both of us had the thought, like, that's not competition. This is somebody to collaborate with, and so we got into deep conversations about making and being the kind of person who wants to create new things, and right away. And then we started imagining Fundy Market as the pandemic started and the effects of the regulations started rolling out. We thought, what if we could coordinate local makers in a way that we could take orders from people for what they needed from that week, and then we deliver locally made goods to them. So we partnered with a local courier service, and she and I baked long into the night, many nights, and then we'd leave our baking gig and go to a garage and pack up boxes and ship them all over Charlotte County. And we had that going for close to a year, Fundy Market. It was really, I think it was a pretty incredible reaction to the pandemic from both of us, that we saw a need and we wanted to be a part of that new system building.
What's so interesting about the book, because I think the pandemic did teach us, there's so many silver linings, as hard as it was in the pandemic, that we learned from what we were able to do, you know, literally overnight, was change the way we were living to keep each other safe. Can you talk a little bit about why you decided to include climate as an emergency that we needed to respond to? COVID's still a part of the book, and that's but the title 42nd Wave has to do with more climate as well. Tell people a little bit about the title and why climate was also a necessary component of future issues for you.
Great question. I think what I was feeling before the idea for the book landed on me, or in me, that everything felt just too overwhelming. It felt like some days felt like I was on a carousel, and I'd look at one major issue and then the next major issue and the next major issue, and I would spiral around just focusing on different things that felt wrong, different things that felt like they weren't contributing to a good, happy way of living. And when the pandemic hit, it felt like we had learned as a species, universally, how to work together and collaborate out of necessity. So I thought, what if we did that with all of, what if there were some of these other major issues tied into a reason to draw back as well? And the other beautiful thing that, again, writes itself about that concept is that life lived with a smaller footprint automatically solves so many of these problems while bringing in additional benefits as well. There's a wonderful professor in St. Stephen, Walter Thiessen, at St. Stephen's University. He wrote a book, Glimpses of the Good Life, that's been a wonderful influence on me. And he says, generally, if something is good to do, that it's good to do for more than one reason. So if you choose to walk to your local grocery store, you're getting exercise, you're getting fresh air, you're running into neighbors, and you're not burning fuel, and you're not exiting from the day. You're engaged because you have to be. And so I think that concept is a real underlying theme here as well.
I felt from reading it that I did feel it was hopeful. It wasn't dystopian to me, but the message that I really took away from it is that idea that climate is a crisis, and it does require us to be extremely, to rebuild in a lot of ways the parts that are broken, and not just do these small changes. It really means thinking about the system as a whole and reconstructing it.
Right. And I think that what can be scary about, well, lots of things are scary about that idea, but what can be scary about the idea of our future is that it almost feels like we need to step back, like we need to retract some of our progressions. But what's terrifying is that we've made so many advancements in terms of justice and our understanding of the people around us and our place in the world. So I guess I'm curious whether we could move forward with what we know now about justice and about how to be good to each other, while taking a step back from systems that are too big to function. Again, systems made for everybody all at once to have a little tiny piece instead of a smaller group of people with a smaller list of availability. And
which makes me have to wonder, since I've read book 1, but book 2, Breaking on the Shore, what year is this set, and what can we expect down the road?
So this one's set in 2034, because it was written at the very beginning of this year. And one thing that I want to do with this series is, well, the first book is really, it's set in July 2031. So this one's set in January 2034, and specifically so that I can write it exactly 10 years in the future. And the other 2 books to come in the series will cover spring and fall. Again, 2 years in the future, 10 years in the future from when I write them. And I wanted to do that so that we could look at what's happening in people's pantries and what sort of food preservation is going on, what are the important things throughout each season to provide as a community to each other, and what do we do individually in terms of road clearing or path clearing, and what do we do as an organized group. Yeah.
What made you want to do fiction and take these ideas, which could actually be really life philosophies as well, but you've written it into a beautiful story that people can relate to? Why did you want to pursue fiction that way?
Well, right before writing the book, I was reading Stephen King's On Writing, and that had a huge part to play in me actually putting pen to paper for this project, particularly around his idea that plot is not the most important thing to come to a writing project with. He says that instead you need to develop characters and plop them down into a setting and then let the plot happen to them. And that I knew, I've been writing for years, and I've written short stories, I've dabbled in fiction. I'd never done a project like this, and I really think that it was reading that bit of advice and encouragement from Stephen King that made me think, okay, let's plop Sophie into this setting 10 years in the future and see what happens.
I will say Stephen King's On Writing is beside my bed. It is that book. Sometimes you open a page and it's great writing advice.
Yes.
It's great life advice, too.
Big time. And he's so funny. I mean, so I think the other part of it is that our attention spans are lessening and lessening, right? So I'm trying to package these ideas in as cute and funny and delicious a package as I can so that it can be digestible.
It was very digestible, and I loved it, and I wonder what you got out of it. As a writer, writing can be a very therapeutic process.
Yes.
It's a great way to think about the world around you. Even if you do it in a fictional setting, it is still that boiled down truth.
So true. It ended up being like a mental health exercise to imagine a hopeful future, and to spend so much time in that world. The experience for writing both of these books, it's been so immersive. One of the other pieces of advice on writing is to set a word count each day and to stick to that. Otherwise, you lose the flow of the project. And so when it's for both of these books, when writing them, it's been like 5 to 6 weeks, head down. Every spare moment is just spent in this world, imagining it and getting those words onto paper.
I think you're doing what so many people dream of doing. So many of us think we have a novel in our head, but to actually do it is a totally different thing. What was your process when you said you had a word count, but did you have a time of day you wrote? Did you have maybe a walk you took in the afternoon to get ideas? Writers are also individualistic and yet don't always share their strategies.
It's so true. And oh my gosh, I don't know if I've ever felt so much like a writer as you asking this question, because I have a lot of little weird idiosyncrasies and things around the writing. I actually have to write on paper. I don't know if that just comes from years of journaling as starting as a little kid, but I find it really difficult to imagine on a laptop. So I have a spot in our backyard. It's a few-minute walk into the woods. there's a little creek. I call it Storybrook, and I just bring a camping chair back there. And it's close enough to the house that you're only about a 5-minute walk from a fresh cup of coffee, but you know, you can still hear the neighbors' chickens in the background, but you can't see anything but trees all around you for a 360 view. That's been the writing spot for me, and thankfully, you know, I don't need a power cord out there for a laptop. I just need my notebook.
And are you a writer who's, while writing, reading a lot too, or do you prefer to focus on the story?
Absolutely. I think one of the cool things about writing is that it is an inhale and exhale process, and so I don't beat myself up if I spend a few hours watching trashy TV. And then it ends up inspiring some writing, because I think it's all about absorbing content and then exhaling with your own perspective. So definitely reading a ton, and lately it's just been murder mysteries, man. I can't get enough. But I listen to a ton of podcasts. And one thing I talk about in this second book, Sophie and the character of Zoe get into a conversation around creativity, and Zoe says, I don't know if I'm really a writer, I think I'm a thinker in post-production. I think most of writing is staring at a wall or watching trashy TV or listening to a podcast or being in conversation with people and letting it percolate, and then like 5% of writing is actually putting it into words. It's so much about the letting yourself get into a thought process and tying those ideas together. And just based on what you said about folks having the idea that for a novel in their head, I just really want to encourage people to friggin' write it. Like, if you've got an idea, just do it. I self-published these books, and I'm happy that I did, because it gives me complete control over the project. And I really want to encourage people, if they have an idea, even if they've never written anything before, just put pen to paper and just try. Like, it can be really rewarding.
Was there a moment when you knew you were done with your first novel? You're like, it's done. And did you show people beforehand? What's that process like?
Yeah, I am so grateful. I mean, because I'm self-published, I've really had a strong reliance on a circle of readers around me. So I had my partner, John, my best friend, Patricia, my sister, Hannah. People were reading as I was going. Oh, and my best friend, Katie. It was just, I'd send a group message and say, okay, chapter 4 is ready to read. And then get feedback. That was an excellent editing system as well, you know, finding typos. They're really good at that.
Now, did Susie at Carmen's, because she makes her way, she's in the novel, she pops away the whole way through.
Yes.
Did she get a chance to read it, and what would she tell you about her character?
She did, and actually Carmen's has been one of the biggest supporters of the books. They sell copies there right at the counter for me. It's so kind. And she found it really delightful, I think, and I specifically wrote Susie's name with a Z to it was just kind of like a writer's joke to me. This was before I thought that I would publish it or anything like that, but Susie, her name is spelled with an S, but I felt like maybe this will alleviate any legal tension if she comes after me, you know, which is generally,
Susie.
Right, exactly. I can't imagine. And generally I only include people's names in my books if I have something really nice to say about them. And Vicki, you actually show up in the second book as well. Which is really fun.
Which I will be reading tonight then, so I look forward to finding where I fit in.
Fantastic.
My lawyers will be in contact.
Yeah, exactly. Don't worry, I spelled it with 2 Ks. No. But in the second book, Sophie is working on a podcast, and she it's called Small Town Famous, and she's going around to people and interviewing them about what they make, how they're living, what they're eating, and then each week she records them doing a presentation to a group of people, and so she goes through this process in the book, and then goes to meet with a couple of her mentors in St. John, one of whom is Julia Wright, who is at CBC, and Julia is asking her who the next episode is on, and she says, "Oh, Vicki Hogarth, obviously." So I hope you enjoyed that.
Well, yeah, Julie and I will have to form a book club and read it together.
There you go.
And I'll have to have you back for book 2 too. Thank you, Zoe, so much for coming in today, and we will have you back in a few weeks to talk about book 2.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
My guest today has been Charlotte County author Zoe Fitch. She was here to talk about her novel, 42nd Wave. She'll be back soon if you want to read along at home to talk about the follow-up novel, Breaking on the Shore. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.
Southwest Magazine is a news and public affairs production of CHCO Television.